Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today I'm going to do a couple of different videos. Actually, I'm going to do 3 videos. 2 are inside and 1 is outside. And the first 2 videos are going to be for my indoor gardening series. And I wanted to talk a little bit about watering your plants, and I wanted to talk about fertilizing. And since I do those on the same day and they go hand in hand, I am going to separate these out into 2 different videos, but we have everything out here ready to go because I am going to be watering and fertilizing today. So for the first topic, let's talk a little bit about watering your plants when you're growing them indoors. Now, when I talk about growing plants indoors, I'm talking about growing vegetables for consumption over the winter. There'll be a lot that's similar when you're just growing seedlings indoors, but there's also going to be some things that are different when you're actually growing for production indoors. Now, I'll link a playlist up here that has a lot of videos for my indoor gardening series, and we have talked about watering a lot in the past. Let's go over some of the details on a plant-by-plant basis, and then we'll talk about how watering changes as plants get bigger. So let's first start with my hydroponics units. Now, I have 2 hydroponics units. This one is an AeroGarden. I'm growing a couple of different tomatoes in here. I also have a Devo unit over here that we'll look at in a little bit. The Devo unit has a bigger reservoir, holds more water, thus we can grow more plants in it. And the AeroGarden unit is a little smaller. Now when you do hydroponics units, there are a lot of different models, a lot of different types, a lot of different sizes. You can go into deep rabbit holes when looking into growing hydroponically, and they're all amazing. Now, one thing you do need to think about is as your plants get bigger and older, you're going to need to think a little bit about how you're going to water your plants. So with this hydroponics unit, we have a reservoir right here. It's kind of hard to see, but the water has sunk down a little bit, not too much. You can see all the roots in there. It's kind of hard to get it to focus really well, but I always want to make sure that the water doesn't go too much lower than the level required right here. Now we are not going to be watering this one right now. We're going to water the other one because I am going to actually do a 4th video, and that's on how to clean out a hydroponics unit, because when I opened this, there's a lot of stench. I totally forgot to clean out the unit after I harvested the radishes, but we are getting a little bit of decay going on there from the roots that are left over. So the next video before the fertilizer is going to be how to change the water in a hydroponics unit. But you can see that the little tomatoes are not really suffering yet, but we don't want them to start to suffer. We've actually already, and I think this is day 30 or something like that, we've already gotten little tomato flowers. We're going to tap the little flower because they're self-pollinating, but they do need a little bit of stimulation for the pollen to spread properly. And we're going to start getting orange hat tomatoes. So this is where you add the water. Let's go look at the Devo unit and see how that looks. Now this area has changed a little bit since my last video. When I talked about lights, we talked a little bit about the AeroGarden lights, and they went on sale, and I got this for a steal of a deal. I went onto Little Tech Girl's Facebook page, the one about AeroGarden, Kratky, and Gardening Fanatics, and she listed some sales and some discount codes, and I got this unit for extremely cheap. And I love it. It's opened up this area that was previously unusable because I didn't want to hang lights, and I was going to have to hang lights to be able to use it. So now this light has a stand, and we can grow more of my succulents under it. But that necessitated the moving of my Devo unit. So for this Devo unit, let's look in here and see if we can see how deep the water is. The water, it's really hard to see, but I like the water to come up to that max level. So we're going to need to add water, and let me show you how we do it. Now we'll see how well this goes, because I'm going to have to do it one-handed, and this is pretty heavy, and I'm not a very strong person. But I like to use this container for watering because it has a nice spout and it holds a ton of water. Now, if I can do this appropriately, I try not to spill as much as possible because it starts getting crustiness over the top of the Devo unit. Now that you've seen how I'm going to do it, let me do this with both hands, and I will show you the depth of that water. So there it is, it's full, and that's the amount of water we used. Now the last time I filled it up was about a week to a week and a half ago, and that's how much water it used. And it's using that much water now because these plants are getting so large. And I think we also have more little flowers. So I'm going to need to be watching this 2 or 3 times a week just to make sure that it doesn't run out of water. Now, one other thing is I like to use clean water when I fill this up because I don't want to be clogging the filter in there and I don't want to add problems to the roots. Now, if we look at the roots here, I always pull out the roots when I water and look at them, and they're very nice and white and clean. So we don't have any issues that are going to require cleaning out this tank. Now, one problem with hydroponics units is if you want to go on vacation and they're using a ton of water, you might have a problem. Now, I know that AeroGarden has what's called an aerovore, which is a reservoir that the tank can pull from when it runs out of water. You can make those on your own, and I'll leave that up to your own research because I've never done that, and I don't know if that's something that I want to pursue at this point. But anyway, there is that option and there is that consideration when having hydroponic units. Now let's talk about watering succulents a little bit. Now, when watering succulents, you need to be very careful about getting a ton of water over the leaves. Now, I know that in this room it won't be a huge problem with them because I do have my fan and it isn't extremely humid. But I try to keep water off the leaves as much as possible, and I guess I'm a little bit obsessive. I know exactly how much water each of these plants needs for a week. I only water my succulents once a week. And I use actually this turkey baster, use clean water. I suck up enough water, and I know that containers this size usually only need about 2 turkey basters full of water. And then what I do is I wait, and as you can see, water is starting to pour out the bottom. That's when I know that I have given this container enough water. Container this size takes 2 or 3, so I'll give it 1, 2, we'll give this one 3. So each one of my succulent plants, I know exactly how much water I need to give them, so it completely fills up the pot and runs out the bottom. And once it's running out the bottom, you know you've given your succulents enough water. What succulents cannot stand is to sit in water. They need to dry out completely, so the soil that I use drains extremely well. It's a succulent mix, and they don't like to dry out way too much, but they will give you signs that they're too dried out by wrinkling leaves. I don't wait for the wrinkling leaves. I just wait until the pots are dried out. I can tell that by lifting them, and then I water them, and it's usually once a week. Now, when I have pots this large, trying to water them with a turkey baster or a syringe or something like that is a bit too much. So I actually do just use my spout, very carefully find openings, and I just pour water in. Now, it's really hard to tell how much water this has gotten because the tray is a fixed tray and I don't want to accidentally overflow it. So I've kind of just messed around with it so that the plants always look healthy and have good new growth and don't look like they're rotting or wilting. And I've just kind of fiddled around until I figured out about how much water this needs. And that's how I water my succulents. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is my wicking mat system with my lettuces. Now, I love having the lettuces on this wicking mat. And all I need to do to figure out if it needs more water is I just stick my finger down the side and feel where the water is. I've got my finger an inch down, and I can feel that the water is not that deep. The larger these lettuces grow, the more often I have to water them. So all I do is I just pour water into the tray until it's pretty full. Now, another thing I do just to make life a little bit easier is I fill up all of my containers. This is the amount of water it takes me once a week to water all my plants. Now, there are several plants in this room that are getting large enough that they have to be watered 2 or 3 times a week, and I just watch those to see how dry the pot is getting. You can see right here that my radishes are starting to wilt a little bit, so I know that those pots, their radishes are growing big enough that I'm actually needing to water those every other day. So I just watch. I try not to let them get to the wilting point like that, but I wanted these to wilt a little bit so you can see what it looks like. Those were watered 2 days ago. They definitely need to be watered again today. But this is the amount of water it takes on my weekly watering. So I just have this container right here. I water the hydroponic units first because this container sometimes can get a little dirty. And I don't want dirty water in the hydroponics container, but it doesn't matter if it's dirty water in the other units. So just finished pouring water in here. You can actually see how full that is. That was filled up about a week ago, I think. And now the lettuces are going to continue growing. And we're almost getting to the point where we can do a harvest. Now in my little seedlings right here, I do not want these to dry out at all. So when I go through my seedlings, I look at them, I see if they look wet. If they look a little bit dry, I use my sprayer unit. So this unit is one that pumps. Sorry for the messy floor. We've got shedding citrus. Pump it up. Take the little sprayer and I water this way. This way we don't disturb the seedlings out of the soil. We still have some seeds that have not germinated, so I don't want to wash those out of the soil. So this is how I water these seedlings. Now I want to show you how easy it is to water a tray full of seedlings. It has a lot of seedlings in it that I don't want to mist water. Just take your water. And I've basically learned over the years how much water it takes to water the pots in each of my trays. This is how much water it's going to take to water those. Now, if for some reason tomorrow there is still water in this tray, I will use my turkey baster and empty it out. It's easier to use the turkey baster than it is to remove all the pots and then dump the water out. So I use a turkey baster, dump it into this. This will be empty at that time, and they're good to go. Most of the time though, I've gotten it down to enough of a science that this is the amount of water it takes. And I do the same thing with my large pots. They do take more water. It's kind of hard to film and water at the same time. This is why I actually have towels on the floor. So for the dirty shoes too. Now pots this big take a bit more water, so let's put a little more water in there. With pots this big, this is about how much water I put in there. Now, once again, if there still is water in there tomorrow and the plants look hydrated and the pots look like they're properly hydrated, I will use my turkey baster and remove the extra water out of there. Now when there's pots like this that have my catmint in it, my catgrass, and my onions over there, I will actually just pour a little bit of water in it. Very carefully, because I don't need the entire pot wet right now. I mean, it is wet all the way, it is wet down to the bottom, but I don't need it to be wet from the bottom up because of these seedlings. So I just very gently pour enough water in there so they're watered. Now let's look at my citrus. Citrus is tricky to water. First thing you need to make sure of is that you have soil that drains extremely well. You want to pour enough water in there that water pours out of the bottom and into these trays. Now, you don't want to leave your citrus sitting in water, so I do have stones at the bottom so that you can leave a little bit of water in the trays, but the bottom of the pot does not touch the water. And then if there's too much water in there, once again, I'll use my turkey baster, pull out most of the water, leave a little bit to add humidity to the room, and that's how I water my citrus. So I just use, once again, my trusty container. Now I'm not going to water these as much as I normally do because I do need to add some fertilizer, and we'll talk a little bit about it in the fertilizer video, but you want your plants to be properly hydrated before you add water that has fertilizer in it. So that will soak down, some of that will pour into the tray in the bottom, and then we'll suck it out if necessary. I do kind of watch them. It just depends on how warm the room gets. Normally they get watered about once a week. Sometimes we have to wait for 2 weeks. It's been 2 weeks since I last watered these, and they are not showing really too much signs of of drought. You can see the leaves curling just a little bit. That means that they do need to be watered. They're not really dry, but they are just getting a little bit dry. Now, watering your plants is definitely something that you're going to need to work on. You're going to need to look at your plants, figure out exactly how much water they need. It's going to depend on your growing medium, the temperature of your room, your humidity. Some plants may need to go longer and some plants sooner. So learn to look at your plants and figure out the schedule that works best for you. Now, I do find that it is best to have a schedule. Sunday is my watering day and Thursday is my watering day. So I come in here and I look at those plants and I basically water everything that I know needs to be watered during those days. The other days of the week, I'll come in and look at my plants and see what needs to be watered. And there's usually very few things that need to be watered at that point. Now, one thing you want to make sure you don't do is overwater. Overwatering plants is the fastest way to kill them. Just make sure your soil has good drainage and that you know the signs when your plants need water and know the schedule that your plants need to be watered on, and you should do really well. So hopefully this video has been helpful to you. If it has been helpful, I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and go have a wonderful garden adventure.